Hi, welcome to another episode of Webcam Sessions. This week we're going to do a little less with playing and a little bit more with some of the housekeeping things that go with playing the ukulele. And today we're going to talk about strings. And what's fun about strings is, well, they make a huge impact on your tone. In fact, I think it's probably, other than the quality of the instrument that you're playing, it's the biggest contributor to what kind of tone you get. Good strings on a good uke sound really good. Bad strings on a good uke, well, makes the good uke sound a little bit worse. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of my preferences with strings, and I want to kind of give a disclaimer that it's exactly that. It's preferences, and strings are one of those things where everybody has a different preference of what kind of string they like and what reason they do. So everything I'm giving you here is just my opinion, and kind of take it for what it's worth. And you know, if you have a different thought on a set of strings, or you like a different setup than I'm talking about here, be sure to leave a comment below with your favorite setup, and we can kind of talk about it a little bit more. It's fun to see different people's opinions. But let's just start with my main instrument and what I like to use for strings on it. This is my Ukulele ukulele. I've gotten some requests about it before. I eventually will do an episode talking about different uke brands and woods and all that fun stuff. But this is my primary player for teaching. I love using this for teaching as well as performing. And the reason is it's got these cool fretboard markers, right? But the strings that I use on this ukulele are what are called Daddario Pro Arte strings. And they are a string that's a little bit thicker than most. And what's interesting is when you look at strings, there are different types of materials that are used to create strings. This type of material is nylon. And nylon tends to be a little bit thicker of a string, not always, but tends to be. And they come in a package that looks something like this. I believe these are the EJ65Ts, formerly known as the J71s. It's just the model numbers. But what's interesting about these strings is these are actually repackaged classical guitar strings. So they're thick enough to be guitar strings, essentially. And that gives them a very unique tone, and one that I really like. Jake Shimabukuro kind of made this a popular type of string, and he's one of the reasons why they now make it in sets. And other players like Aldrin Guerrero have used them. And the reason is because that kind of guitar-like feel gives it a little bit more resilience. And what I mean by that isn't necessarily that they wear better, but rather you can really dig in with your hand. If you grow out a little bit of nails, you can really use those nails in there and get a really, really prominent sound. And that's what I really like about it, is it allows me to utilize my nails. And what's funny about these strings, though, is because they're this kind of thicker nylon and meant for a guitar, they have a lot of what's called mids to them. And mids are kind of the, not high end of the ukulele, but rather kind of the low end of the ukulele, because mids are, well, ukulele doesn't have much in the way of true low end, right? And so this makes the ukulele a little less bright, a little bit more warm is really what it does. And so that's why I like these. I like that type of tone, that thicker, warmer tone. But it's not for everybody, and it's not even for every ukulele. It's kind of funny because this ukulele, being a Kanalea with a spruce top, spruce tends to be a brighter wood. So one of the other reasons I love these strings on it is because these strings are a little bit darker, a little bit warmer, and it balances nicely with the brightness that the spruce gives. It's just a preference. And so these are my favorite strings, but they're not always my favorite for every instrument. And so these are nylon, an example of nylon. They also make them in black nylon and other things. These are clear strings. But the other type of ukulele string that's really popular right now are fluorocarbon strings. And what's really funny is fluorocarbon strings are just fishing line. Essentially, they're graded fishing line that's used for musical instruments. It's just fascinating, but they're really high quality strings that sound really good. Worth is the most popular company that makes these. And in fact, when I get just a general email saying, help, I need to put on new strings, what do you recommend? The kind of go-to string that I actually recommend people try on their ukuleles are just the Worth Clears, is what they're called. And I really like them because they're a brighter string and they just have a good sound, good intonation, good playability. And what's funny is I just told you about how I prefer these strings because they're warmer in tone. And that's mainly because of the style of music that I play. Because I'm an instrumentalist that really never sings for the sake of all of you, I really depend on my ukulele to have a wide spectrum of tones. I want to make it bright, but I also want it to be very dark. I want to be able to get more body to it. And these strings allow me to do that. And some people might even describe these strings as being a little bit dull, which if you're just essentially, if you're strumming and singing, they are a little bit, flattened in terms of the sound. It doesn't have that brightness to them. And Worth strings does have a little bit more of that brightness to it, but it's not overly so. It's a nice amount. So it's kind of the go-to if you're not sure if you want to be strumming and singing or doing instrumentals or whatever else. The Worths, I think, are just great. You'll notice that the more that you finger pick, the more you tend to actually like brighter strings because it's a little bit easier to get a nice note sound. And when you're playing with more strumming, you're going to lean towards strings that tend to be a little bit louder. And that's just because of the different styles of strings. So with the Worth fluorocarbons, they're a little bit brighter, and fluorocarbons tend to be a little bit brighter in general. And they usually tend to be a little bit thinner too, a thinner string. And the use of a thinner string is, for some people, it tends to be a little bit easier to push. With a thick string like this, it can actually be harder on your fingers, especially when you're first starting out. And the thinner string oftentimes is a little bit easier to fret. So that's one advantage. It's funny because some people actually think it's harder to fret and that they're harder on the fingers because they're thinner. It feels like they not cut into your fingers, but a little sharper in there. It's all opinions, right? So I find it a little bit easier with the fluorocarbon. But with these fluorocarbon strings, my favorite type of fluorocarbon strings, and I'm pretty sure they're fluorocarbon, are these, Sabra's Alliance strings. These strings are actually a little bit more expensive than most that I get. The Daddarios here run about $4 a set, and I think these are about $9 to $10. And the reason is because they sound really good, and they actually last a long time too. The downside to nylon is actually how long it lasts. When I'm playing really regularly, if I'm performing or anything, I tend to replace my strings every 4 weeks or so with nylon, just because I feel like after that 4-week mark, the tone goes down just a little bit, and that's enough for me to want to change them. That's not usual though. In fact, on this ukulele here, I haven't changed the strings in I think a couple months now. It's due. It is due for a string change. But with something like this, you can actually leave the strings on, I find, for 6 to 9 months at a time without it starting to go bad. And I think that's just an element of fluorocarbon strings. They tend to last longer. So fluorocarbon's a little brighter, lasts a little longer, is a thinner string. And nylon is a little bit warmer, a little bit darker in tone, fatter string, and doesn't tend to last as long. So it really comes down to preferences with all of this type of stuff. But one thing that's important with strings is it's not always a matter of just buying a set, putting it on, or buying a set and putting it on and not having any problems. A lot of times when you change strings, you might develop a buzz, or you might notice that the ukulele sounds a little out of tune or things like that. And first thing, the ukulele will definitely sound out of tune when you put on new strings because it takes time for them to stretch, and that's normal. A lot of times people put on a new set of strings and they can't even play one chord without it going out of tune, and they think something's wrong, but that's totally normal. That's good. Strings stretch, it's the elasticity of them, which helps our tone, so you want to make sure strings are stretching at first, tune it up, tune it up, tune it up, and you'll find a lot more success there. And when you do change the strings, what I actually find helps the most is dedicate some time to changing strings, so that not for you to actually change them, but right when they're done changing, tune it up, play, tune it up, play, tune it up, play, and do that for an hour, hour and a half, and you'll find the next time you pull your uke out of the case, it'll be much better than if you just put on the strings and put it in the case and put it away. But anyways, the aspect of putting on new strings, sometimes you might get buzzes on the strings. And the reason for that is because the diameter of these strings are different. And if you normally have a small, thin string within what we call our nut slot, which is this right here, and you put in a big fat string, it's going to sit up top and not properly go into that indentation. And the big problem is when you have a big slot for a big string and then you put a skinny string in there and it sets right in, and you'll notice that can actually cause the string, when you play it, to vibrate on the fretboard and create a buzz. In the event you run into a problem like that, I've got a really, really easy little fix that I like to do, which is just take a piece of paper, rip off an itty bitty piece there, something like this, and actually put this under the string, between the string and the nut, so right in this sort of slot here. And you might notice that pulls the string out enough for it to stop buzzing. And that's when you're putting on a thinner string than what you usually have on there, or if you just have a buzz when you play an open string. It's a nice little trick. But this is especially a problem when you're playing with low G versus high G. A low G ukulele, which I've got one here, my more beta ukulele, you'll actually notice that the G string on this is not just a G string like this, it's actually wound. And my C string on this is also wound. Wound strings are, I believe, nickel wound, and they're a true opinionated thing where if you like them, you like them, if you don't, you don't. The reason that builders like to use them is it actually tends to help the intonation and also helps prevent buzzing. The wound string has a little bit more tension to it, I think, that just helps get a good tone. But players are split on it. A lot of times players don't like it because it'll create that kind of squeaking noise as you're moving your fingers down and up the fretboard. And some people actually like that. I don't mind it with a guitar, but on a ukulele, it gets old for me, but I'm giving it a shot. And so this one has a wound C string, just because that's the preferred string set that Chuck Moore uses with his ukuleles. But the G is wound because it has to be. And whenever you're tuning an ukulele low G, you can't just take your normal G string and tune it down. It will be too slack. The tension's not right. The string's diameter is too skinny. It doesn't work. What you have to make sure you do is get a string that's actually made for playing with a low G ukulele. And they sell a lot of different types of these strings, and you can even buy them individually without getting a whole new set. And my favorite type, which shout out to Ukulele Jay for this, he's a guy who took some lessons a while back, and man, he suggested this and I'm in love. It's called the Fremont Soloist. It's a wound low G string, and you buy it just as a single string. It's not a set, but just one. And it's that wound type of string, but I find it doesn't squeak nearly as much as others, and I just like the tone of it for when I'm playing with a low G. So that's an option that you can do for trying out a low G on your ukulele. But keep in mind, this is a thicker string. So if you put it on your high G ukulele, the nut slot might be a little bit too small, and that can cause some problems. So there's a variety of things that you can do for that, including sanding out the nut a little bit. I suggest taking a look on like the Ukulele Underground forums in the luthier section and look there for some different tips from luthiers for how to set up the uke. Or if you have a luthier near you who can help you set up your ukulele with different strings, that works too. Now, as we're looking at these different types of strings, as I said before, it's all opinion-based. So what I think gives a brighter tone to someone else, it might end up being darker to them. And that's one of the beautiful things about strings. And so for today's episode, what we're actually going to be doing is I'm giving out a whole bunch of these sets of Daddario strings because I love them and I want to see if you love them too. So be sure to leave a comment below here. We're doing the giveaway both on YouTube as well as Facebook. I'm going to give away a half a dozen or so of these. So just leave a comment, and if you win, I'll be messaging you to get your address to ship them off to. So that way you can try these out and see what you think. I'm a big fan. And again, be sure to leave a comment below to tell me what your favorite type of string is on what ukulele you like, because it's something that's really a cool opinion to kind of see what other people think. So very cool. Now, the only other thing I want to say with strings and kind of care here is on the nut, which is this part right here. We just talked about you could potentially file it out. Sometimes it's actually too big for a string or too small for a string. One thing that you can do that can help that's really easy is just take something like a mechanical pencil and take that lead, that graphite, and actually kind of color inside of the nut slot when you're restringing your ukulele. You'll see it's a little black in there, and the reason is because I actually colored in some of that graphite on the nut. It acts as a little bit of a lubricant, so when I'm tuning the ukulele, it tends to move the string more easily. So if you find that you're turning the peg and all of a sudden it flips one way, might be because the string is actually catching in that area, so that can help a lot. And one more quick note, or two more I should say. One is whenever you're tuning an ukulele, make sure that you always go flat and then turn sharp. And what's funny about that is when you're tuning, you never want to finish a tune going down. So let's say that my ukulele is too sharp. I don't want to just lower the string and leave it there. I want to lower it too low and then come back up. So you always want to finish tuning the peg, making it more taut. To be honest, I don't know the reason for this, but I was told it when I was in college, And it really helped with keeping ukuleles in tune and having strings not slip. So I don't know the science behind it, but I know it works really well. So make sure you always have the string ending going taut. So if it's flat, obviously you don't have to go flat and then go up again, but rather just make sure that you're always tightening the string when you end. So go too flat, come up if it's a little flat there. So, and then the last note here is just when you're restringing your ukulele, the position that it's on the headstock is so important. And if you look at this ukulele, you'll notice that the strings are on these tuning pegs with my very, very reflective headstock. And what you'll notice is the strings all are on the inside of this. So you notice how the string's not coming on the outside here, wrapping around this way. It's on the inside. It's very important for your strings to be going on the inside. It's going to help keep the intonation right and the tension right. And the other piece of importance there is you want to make sure that the strings are going down the peg as you're tuning it. So as I get this in focus here, you can actually see that the strings are all tilting downwards the peg, meaning the string starts up here and it goes down. It does not come up. It does not go up the peg with this part of the string ending up here. It's ending down below. That's really important just to make sure that you're getting good intonation and everything else. So remember, inside and down the peg, and you'll be off to a good start there. So very cool. So again, be sure to comment below, win a couple sets of strings. It's Thanksgiving weekend, so happy Thanksgiving. I know what I'm thankful for, and that's all of this. It's so much fun being able to make these videos, teach ukulele for a living, and everything else. Holidays are pretty slammed for lessons, but I got a few spots open. If anyone is interested, check out my website below at mattukulele.com. And I also want to announce that we're going to be doing a special on my Ultimate Strum course with Ukulele Underground. We're going to be bundling all 4 of the courses, as well as a finger-picking webinar that I gave that was recorded, and then these things called jam tracks, which are actually going to be recordings of strum patterns, as well as videos to teach you how to do them, so you can actually play along with more of like a band type of setting rather than just a single ukulele. And it's pretty fun, pretty cool. Those will be coming out the new year, but if you get this bundle, you'll get access to them as they're released. So very cool. Be sure to check out Ukulele Underground for more information, and specifically check out the link right below. The market.ukuleleunderground link will take you to that bundle where you can get and take advantage of our Christmas, holiday, New Year's, all that fun stuff special. So yeah, let me know if you have any questions with that in any way. I'm looking forward to next week's episode, and in the coming weeks here we'll be doing some Christmas stuff, holiday music and that'll be pretty fun. And yeah, have a great Thanksgiving and aloha.